Blood Money, Part 3, The Resurrection of Elijah Matthews. 4 months, the town of Havenbrook had lived in silence. A silence that smelled like closure but tasted like denial. The Ghost Ledger case had supposedly ended the nightmare. Grant Calloway, the cold-hearted CFO of Cross and Hale, was behind bars. Daniel Cross had confessed to killing Leah Hale in a desperate act of guilt and fear. And the once-respected detective Peter Finch was stripped of his badge, awaiting trial for corruption. But Detective Rachel Monroe knew better. Cases like this never end. They rot, and rot, she'd learned, doesn't vanish, it spreads. Somewhere in the decaying remains of data and case files, one name refused to die. P3-001, Elijah Matthews. Monroe's office was a collage of ghosts, photos, ledger printouts, old tape transcriptions. She stared at Matthews' faded black and white photo pinned to her board. A man once hailed as the pride of Havenbrook, a construction mogul, a philanthropist, until Cross and Hale collapsed, until he lost everything, his home, his business, his marriage, and then he vanished, presumed dead. No body, no grave, no closure. But his name had resurfaced, in a ledger that should never have existed. An investment initiation, logged just weeks after Victor Hale's death. That wasn't grief, that was business. Nothing on the bank trace, said Detective Gary Lee, stepping in with 2 steaming cups of coffee. His eyes were heavy from another sleepless night. The $150,000 transfer went through a shell company, Matthews Holdings LLC. Dissolved a year later. No tax trail. No trace of who touched the funds. Monroe took a sip of coffee, her mind racing. Someone got paid, she murmured. Lee set the second cup down beside her. Or someone got started. Their eyes met, and in that silence the story began to shift. That same night, Ethan Cross, son of Daniel Cross, stood in the evidence room surrounded by boxes of his father's sins. The fluorescent hum filled the air, cold and merciless. He replayed the last voicemail his father ever sent him, the one he tried to ignore for months. Find the truth, Ethan. It's not who you think. He had thought he'd found it, in Calloway's deceit, in the ghost ledger, in his father's broken confession. But now a new name, Elijah Matthews, had rewritten everything. Still chasing ghosts? A familiar voice asked. Mia Ridge, the journalist who had turned the Ghost Ledger case into national news, leaned against the doorway. You really think Matthews is alive? She asked. Ethan didn't look up. If he's dead, why is he still collecting interest? Mia frowned. Then your father, he wasn't the villain? No, Ethan said quietly. He was the pawn. Mia turned toward the wall behind him. A sprawling board of connections, red string, and printed screenshots of offshore accounts. If Matthews was the one moving the money, she said, then Calloway wasn't the mastermind. He was the enforcer. Somebody financed this entire collapse before it even started. 2 days later, Monroe and Lee followed the trail to the edge of Havenbrook, the abandoned Matthews construction site. The building stood like a mausoleum, half-collapsed, eaten by time. The signboard out front still bore the company logo, faded and rusted. Inside, the air was stale, old plaster, rotted wood, and the faint metallic scent of forgotten wealth. Monroe's flashlight cut through the dark, tracing the outlines of desks buried in dust. Lee's boot kicked something metallic. A locked filing cabinet that he pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, rows of yellowed paper, invoices, loan sheets, company correspondence. But one label stopped Monroe cold. Riverside Capital Funding. Doesn't match his company, Lee muttered. No, Monroe whispered, lifting a document. But it matches something else. At the bottom of the page, a signature line, initials only, GC. Grant Calloway, she breathed. He'd signed funding contracts for Matthews' company, 2 years before the Cross and Hale collapse. The supposed victim wasn't just involved, that he was partnered with the man who destroyed everything. This wasn't revenge, Monroe said. It was design. Days later, the forensics lab called that they'd recovered a damaged cassette tape from a rusted safe under Matthews' office floor. The label read, Riverside, Q1 Review 2003. The audio was warped and static heavy, but 2 voices still bled through the distortion. Calloway, calm, clinical. If we pull the debt ceiling at the right time, Cross and Hale will bleed liquidity. We let Victor panic, let Daniel mortgage everything, then we move in as rescuers. Matthews, measured, and when they can't repay? Calloway, then you own them. Every asset, every share, every life. When the playback ended, Lee swore under his breath. He didn't lose everything, he said. He built the trap. Monroe leaned against the table, the realization crawling up her spine. Elijah Matthews wasn't destroyed. He disappeared because he planned to. Weeks of digging followed. Immigration logs, corporate registries, offshoring corporations. Every lead went dark, until one night Monroe's phone buzzed. It was a message from Mia Ridge. Attached, a grainy photo from a 2006 real estate conference in Singapore. At the far edge of the frame stood a man in a gray suit, silver hair, head slightly turned. The name tag read, Director, Eastgate Capital Group. Elijah Matthews. The dead man had been living as a global investor. The final break came from an unlikely source, Ethan Cross. While performing a deep scan of Callaway's flash drive, he found an encrypted folder under a hidden partition, mislabeled, disguised under a video codec. The folder's name EL. Inside, 3 files, all marked P4-#####. One caught Monroe's eye, P4-0001, Reinvestment Cycle. Eastgate Holdings 2015. Amount $3.2 million. P4, she whispered. Not P3. This isn't a sequel, Ethan said, his voice low. It's a cycle. 2 months later, the courtroom was packed. The town's eyes were on the man who had started it all, Grant Callaway, pale and trembling. When Monroe played the recovered tape, something inside him broke. He promised me. Callaway cried, his composure gone. He said we'd both walk away clean. Who promised you? Monroe asked. Matthews. Callaway screamed, his voice cracking. He said he'd erase everything. The debts, the names, me. He said if I stayed quiet, I'd live free. He turned, his eyes hollow. You think I'm the ghost in the ledger? He whispered. He's the one who wrote it. Weeks later, the sun dipped behind Havenbrook's skyline. Monroe sat alone in her car outside the police station, staring at the fading light. Her phone buzzed. No sender. No subject. Just one line in the preview, you were never supposed to find me. The email contained a single attachment, a photo of an older man standing on the deck of a yacht, dressed in a white linen suit, a glass of wine in hand. The face was unmistakable, Elijah Matthews. Beneath the image, a single sentence. Every ghost needs a ledger. Her reflection stared back from the screen, tired eyes, sleepless nights, the weight of too many lies unraveling at once. In that reflection, she didn't see a detective anymore. She saw another name waiting to be written in someone else's ledger. The wind outside whispered through the quiet streets of Havenbrook, brushing against the cracked glass windows of the old police station. Somewhere, a streetlight flickered to life, steady, then trembling, then steady again. Monroe exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the windshield. She thought of Callaway, broken and pale in the courtroom. Of Ethan Cross, a son still chasing a father's ghost. Of Mia Ridge, who stopped writing after the last article, vanishing into silence. Every truth they uncovered had only led to another shadow. And now, as the light faded, Monroe finally understood what this case had been all along. Not a mystery to solve, but a cycle to survive. In Havenbrook, the dead didn't stay buried. They just changed names, changed faces, and reinvested. She looked out the window one last time, watching the last trace of daylight vanish behind the skyline. Then she started her car, the headlights cutting through the gathering dark. As she drove away, the town behind her seemed to disappear into the fog, swallowed by its own secrets. And somewhere, miles away, on calm blue waters, Elijah Matthews raised his glass to the horizon, the faintest smile on his lips. Because the game was never over. It had just begun again.